Welcome, everybody. We are so glad that you have joined us today. And for those of you that are new to a bilingual Montessori community conversation, it's a mouthful, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about bilingual Montessori, about the project, and about our team. Plamana, can you share the slides for this part? Okay. Can everybody see the slides that we have? Yes. Okay, great. All right, so on the second slide, you will see the origin of our project here. This all came about in 2020 from the many conversations that were happening of people that were searching for information about the practices for Montessorians working with more than one language in their school. In fact, the seed that was planted in 2019 at the Lead Montessori Conference open space session that you see in the photo, this was the origin of bilingual Montessori. Currently, there's little training to support this work, so everyone out there on their own is trying to do their best. There's also little research for Montessori schools on this topic and not enough documentation of effective practices. Also, by the way, we have just posted a research article about that very topic on our website, so you can check that out. So we received the 3-year grant that the founding partners applied for, and the project was launched in February 2022. Some of you in our community submitted letters when we were applying that stated that you feel this project is very needed. And we thank you for that and want everyone to understand that from the beginning, this has been a community project. And our approach to this challenge comes from a whole school perspective as we work with the specific needs of the different groupings that make up a school, namely Montessori guides, the language specialists, and the school leaders. Keeping these groupings in mind, in our project, we're developing the grant outcomes in 3 different areas. The first, we are creating a design process field guide that will share effective classroom administrative practices from Montessori schools and second language acquisition information for supporting the goal of bilingual education. Second, we will be offering a 3-level online training course based on the field guide for those wanting to build or improve a Montessori school with support. And those are both in development right now. Third, we're creating a community for all of us to engage, practice, and support each other through different activities, such as these community conversations, our social media groups, and the bilingualmontessori.com website. And the project was formed by partners in 4 different European countries. Our team consists of a group of carefully selected experts who have joined across Europe to work towards our bilingual Montessori outcomes. And I will introduce our whole team. Some of them are not here today, but we have Mirka Blichkova, who's the founder and executive director of the Montessori Institute of Prague in the Czech Republic as our project coordinator. Dr. Mary Kay McCabe, who founded Madrid Montessori School in 2006, and in 2018 created Learning Ecologies to offer training courses and consulting services for Montessori educators, specializing in bilingualism. Maria Smirnova, who founded and operated 4 bilingual schools in Paris, is now supporting others to open schools across Europe. Her French company, Montessori at Work, is a bilingual Montessori partner. Maria brings her interest in design processing and her expertise as a children's house and elementary guide to our project. Lucy Wellstead is the founder and director of the Montessori Cordoba International School, a bilingual school in Spain. She represents the Education for Life group as a bilingual Montessori partner organization. Lucy's experience as an entrepreneur and school leader brings important insight for those creating bilingual schools or second language programs. And we have Dr. Aoife Ahern, who is a professor of language education at the Universidad Complutense of Madrid. She is bilingual education expert and teacher educator in the areas of second language learning, who guides us in our research, and she provides strong support in the area of second language learning. Lucy Urbanichkova, she is an experienced ESL teacher and language coordinator at Montessori Schools Andulek in Prague, Czech Republic. She brings years of her experience as an English teacher and strong organizational skills to our project. Myself, I'm Amy Tobias. I joined the team as our project manager. I'm an experienced Montessori elementary guide in some bilingual settings, and I've worked for 6 years as a coordinator of a bilingual program. And Plamena Koleva, gosh, Plami, I need to ask you how to pronounce that, joins us as our Erasmus project consultant who supports us along the way. So together we're a strong team, all working with great passion for this work and enthusiasm to create our new organization, Bilingual Montessori. And please always remember that you are all part of our journey. So keep in touch with us on our website and our social media. Let us know your needs and feedback on the project. In the next slide, you can see how you can get in touch with us. And I will pass my word to my project colleague, Lucy Wellstead, who will share some of up-to-date information with us about how the project is going. And the next slide. Plummy, the next slide. Yeah, here we go.
So hi, everyone. Yeah, today I thought I'd keep you all up to date as to how our field guide is coming along. So for those of you who don't yet know, we're creating a field guide for practitioners that work in the field of bilingual child-centered education. It's definitely a resource that I would have pored over 10 years ago had it been available. And I really think it's going to help new bilingual projects, especially Montessori projects, to plan their programs with the knowledge and the need to make strong decisions right from the start. So we want you all to learn from our mistakes. And also we want to help existing projects be able to really recognize where they're being successful and celebrate that. And also to understand difficulties they might be facing and try and help them find solutions to those difficulties. So we're all working as a team here at Bilingual Montessori. We've worked through different ideas, different formats. We've got our team working on the case studies. So really finding all these expert contributors is the idea is to share the best from the field advice with all of you. We're busy writing at the moment. We're all immersed in our different sections and chapters and parts. We've now got 3 main parts to the field guide. So the first part is Now, these titles aren't definite, but more or less this is what they're about. So we have designing and or refining a bilingual program. Now, this first section really includes invaluable information and experiences about building and organizing a strong, successful bilingual project, but based on the objectives and the realities of your school, which is unique for every school. The main contributors to this chapter are bilingual school founders and leaders like myself, who've been through all the ups and downs and have worked through many different puzzles that you may be experiencing. The second part to the field guide is all about understanding language learning. Now, the main contributor to this chapter is, of course, Aoife Hearn. She is a professor, a language professor who teaches and researches second language acquisition and bilingual education in the University of Madrid. And she's going to share with us her valuable academic knowledge about how exactly children acquire languages. And that will help us really consider this as we prepare scientifically rigorous and developmentally appropriate second language Montessori environments. So that's the science behind what we do in a bilingual environment. And that brings us to the third and final part of the field guide, which is then aimed more directly at guides and language specialists or anyone else who's involved in directly preparing the children's environment. So it's about preparing a bilingual learning environment. So we have highly qualified Montessori guides who are showing us exactly how they do their planning and preparation to do things like create a culture of second language learning in the classroom, but where children can follow core principles, core Montessori principles for effective learning, and are still engaged and independent learners. So obviously this field guide is very ambitious, but thanks to the Erasmus funding and to all the practitioners and experts, not just the BM team, but all of you who are sharing your time and your experience, well, we're busy creating this resource that we hope will become a well-thumbed staple in every office in a bilingual school around the world.
And start talking a bit, introduce you to today's speaker and also the school that she works in, which I happen to know quite well because it's the school that I founded. Florencia Ugalde is originally from Mexico, but she is definitely a citizen of the world. She has spent most of her adult life living in countries other than Mexico, mostly in the Americas. And she's also a bilingual person in every sense of the word, that she herself is bilingual. She went to international school in Mexico as a young person, and now she's raised two adult sons who are bilingual. And in terms of education, she has always used the fact that she's bilingual and worked in schools as an English teacher or English speaker. So she has 21 years total experience working in different international schools. And this is what you will feel when you listen to her present her insights that she's gained over the years, and kind of the way she has been able to adapt to the particular needs of the not English speaking, the children learning English in her environment. You definitely will appreciate the depth of her knowledge. And I personally was thrilled when I still remember she sent me a lovely email with her CV over 10 years ago, and she was coming to Spain, and I couldn't believe it. And so anyway, we met, and the rest is history. She's now been at Madrid Montessori for 10 years. This is her first school year not in the classroom. She stepped out to become a coach for the school, and in particular for the Children's House classrooms. And so she's now supporting the school and with all of her accumulated knowledge in a different capacity. And so that's also very enriching for her in terms of her perspective. Well, I could go on and on, but I think I should let her speak. Let me just briefly, for those of you who don't know, tell you about the school, Madrid Montessori, where she works. It's a school in Madrid. It's an American school, which is why English is offered. It's a school, the socioeconomic demographics, it's, wealthy families for the most part. And, the children as well come from that background. Many of them have parents who know English and travel, but at home they speak Spanish. So it's definitely a situation where it's become more immersion in the younger years, as we want to prepare the children to be successful in elementary and in secondary school in English, which is what a lot of the families choose. So I will let Florencia share her wonderful presentation and share with us what she's learned and what she's created over these years. Thank you, Florencia, for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mary Kay, for introducing me, and thank you everybody for coming. This is very exciting that we are going to talk about experiences that I've had in the classroom, and hopefully some of them will resonate with you and feel like good choices for you. So I'm going to start sharing my screen, if that's... Everybody see the screen?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I can see. Lovely. So welcome to our talk, which says specialized language activities, and that means activities that are really Montessori, but that we have adapted a little to our situation in the school, which is children that are not native and that are learning English in a Spanish-speaking country. So we do this, but always being faithful to the Montessori principles, because this is very important for us as Montessori guides. And so you can see that following the child, for all of us that are trained in Montessori, we know that we are talking about a very important principle because it's at the center of our philosophy, and it is always important and essential, but very important also, and even a little bit more, when we are introducing children to a different language that is not spoken in their country. And so what we do always as guides is that we observe, we plan, and we might sometimes try adaptations that accompany them in this process. And this is very true when we are introducing them to English as an immersion program. And so I have come up with some bespoke, which is a word that I adopted from the British, my mentor, Karen Pierce, which is a beautiful term, bespoke, which is really individually adapted presentations for non-native children. I am focused on the 3 to 6 learning this language, and again, staying faithful to Montessori principles. And I want to say thank you to Renata Krivankova for letting me share the photo of her beautiful reading corner. At my school, like Mary Kay said, we have a full immersion into English program. It has changed over the 9 years that I've been here, but now it's full immersion. It starts from the infant community and goes to upper elementary. And even the infant community has 2 guides. One is in English and one is in Spanish. but they are introduced to English for since they are very young. And Spanish actually becomes more present in the lower elementary when the children turn 6 and they start the elementary years. And of course, in my classroom, in the children's houses, all the environment supports the exposure into English. It's not only the academics, it's everything. It's routines, everything is embedded in the routines. So you can imagine that for the children within context, it is easy to understand when we say many times, please push the chair or wash your hands with soap and water and things like that. It starts to become very easy for them to understand this, and they are learning this way. It is a very high fidelity Montessori program, which means that we are presenting through the presentations, through our training, and as in our albums that we have to prepare as Montessori guides. And we do minimal adaptations, but we follow the child. So we do those little changes. But we also do this following the same criteria that we do to incorporate new presentations. In our training, we were asked to add a practical live presentation, and we needed to do it following a process that was very systematic. So when we are doing these adaptations, we follow the same style.
Florencia, can you share a bit more what the steps are that you would go through when you're going to do that?
Yes, that's very important, Mary Kay, and it's coming in the next one because that is actually very important. Thank you for asking. Okay. We also do lesson study, which is quite a luxury in many schools. We do it in the children's house level, and that has really helped us to come to best agreed practices, and we all learn so much from each other. So this is just a picture of our school. So how do we follow the child? We observe, and observe all the time. Then we take steps to make these materials really developmentally appropriate for the children, because only then will they use them independently. Because if we have beautiful materials on the shelves, but they can't use them successfully, they are really not there to serve and to feed their needs too. And so that's why we are taking steps to do that. So we plan these beautiful bespoke activities. And also what I have called preliminary activities, because in the practical life area, we do have that section of preliminary activities. So I am calling these changes, these little adaptations, preliminary activities. And we follow the Montessori methodology that we were talking about, which is we think about the presentation of all the materials that we are going to need. And then we think about the indirect and the direct purposes. Why are we presenting that little adaptation or that little a preliminary activity? The age of the child. We think the steps through very carefully. And then we follow up with observation and really check that our new presentations are really good for the children and are really for the benefit of the child. And we just wanted to say something very important. We do this to help them use the materials in English, but we very quickly go back to presenting Montessori materials. So that's really important to say. So let's talk about what happens with language in our schools. We have the sound games in small groups, and these are extremely very important for us. And they start at the beginning of the year and they go on for the whole time the child is in our environments. So we do this as I Spy games that I guess everybody knows from playing with their children, I Spy games, where we are trying to make them aware of the beginning sound. So we are exercising, the children are exercising their phonemic awareness. And we do enrichment of vocabulary with these groups. And as you can see, this is a group of mixed age children so that everybody contributes, everybody learns, and it's a very dynamic situation in an environment. We do sound games every day in our classrooms, probably 2 times a day at least. Now, in my training, I was invited not to have the children lead the games, the sound games, which makes a lot of sense. But in Spain, the children that organically and spontaneously started to lead the children to groups was a very good thing. I noticed that this sound games led by the children were really incorporated the materials that we had just presented, the little objects and their names that we just had presented to the children. And so these were beautiful ways of them to practice new vocabulary and communicate in English. So we actually had to sit down and think of a way that these groups should be successful, could be successful. And so we have very little guidelines, like only 3 children participate and the person leading is speaking English. And that this group is really very purposeful. So it is really communicating and playing, and it's been wonderful. So this is not my classroom. I have seen it in another classroom, but I thought it was a beautiful incorporation. It's one of the ideas that I wanted to share with you. But the teachers do the enrichment of vocabulary besides the sound games and the I Spy games. We do enrichment of vocabulary where we do different activities. And here we see a guide that is presenting several materials to the children and naming them. So it's for them to incorporate those words into their vocabulary, into their communication. And in our groups, we really make sure that we use every opportunity that we have with them when we are communicating. And we add, for example, adjectives or prepositions. So this guide is presenting materials they are called dressing frames. There is a zipper dressing frame and a bow dressing frame and other materials. So we would present that and then play games for them to show us, can you show me the zipper dressing frame? Can you put the zipper dressing frame next to the blue sponge? So we very actively think of adjectives that we add so that the children start listening and they organically start incorporating those words to their vocabulary. And of course, it's within context, because everything that we are saying, it's just describing the objects that are on the rug. And when we say place this next to, besides, under, and we are also promoting a lot of communication of prepositions and adjectives in a very organic way for the children. For example, we say, Maria, place the green zipper frame next to the pink sponge. In some of the schools, and we know from our training that group time is optional, but we have realized that for children that are learning a different language, group time is a very valuable time for them to communicate and to learn new things. So we do greetings, we count orally, and we do sometimes calendar, which I will talk about a little bit later. But especially we do songs and rhymes and poems. You can see here that I am using some props. I am using those scarves. If you could see their faces, you would see how happy they are. And that engages them in the action, which relates to the songs that we are singing. So it is more enrichment of vocabulary. We do have lots of conversations and tell real stories. This is really important for any child in any setting, but for us, it is quite important to do it every day. And we end up the group time with reading a book. And I'm going to have to say that this is a very brief group time, and that we are in a transition to go to set up for lunch. So when we read every single day, we try to put the book that we just read in the corner, in the library corner, so that they have it available for them to, and I put within quotes, to read on their own, so that there's a reference for them of what they have, what kind of books they have. We have all kinds. We have books that have not been read, but that has been a very good practice for us. And one of the guides that I have been observing during my coaching sessions uses songs for some books. So many of you might be familiar with the book Brown Bear, Brown Bear, and she would sing the sentences, and it was very good for many children. And I saw many of the students going to the reading corner and taking that book and singing. And so that was very beautiful. I wanted to share that with you. That is our reading corner in our classroom. So our language shelves are like everybody's in a Montessori classroom, very rich with materials. And something that is very important for us learning English as a second language is that we choose our labels really well, and that we rotate very carefully and mindfully, and that we offer the children lots of words that are simple for them to read and that they can use by themselves. So you can see the two boys on the right, they are reading and they are matching the cards with the pictures and the consonant, vowel, consonant, CVC words. They are very successful reading. It's a lot of practice for them, and it's enrichment of vocabulary. So we start with very basic words so that they start reading independently. I inherited this activity on the left. These are phonograms, and most of us know that phonograms in English are very important. We introduced 16 phonograms in the children's houses, which is 3 to 6 years old. And these envelopes are very nice because they have the picture card and then all the cards with the words. And you can see that the phonogram is highlighted in green. And we do a lot of games with this work. We present it first, we read it together, and then we invite them to repeat as much as they can. And when we do those games and we present a lot of references, they can then read sentences like you see on the right. That is a sentence that has phonograms. I guess it says the chimp hugs the cub. So for the children to be successful reading those sentences, we need to do a lot of preliminary activities with things like these envelopes that we have here. The first time, yes? And as you can see, for example, action cards are cards that we have on our shelves that the children read by themselves and then they act out. So in the beginning, I would just print action cards when I started doing Montessori in Spain. And I realized the children had a lot of dependency on the adult. And they needed me to read all of the cards. And then even though we did that, they were not able to do them independently. So this material started to be left on the shelf unused. So what I try to do now is that I very carefully plan the first activities to be, again, CVC words that they can read by themselves. Because the fun of this activity is that they read and discover the action that says, that is on the card, and that they repeat it. It's usually done with 2 children at a time. It's a game. And so once they practice a lot of these words, and we can introduce more difficult words, more complex, like laugh that you have here. But if we don't take these steps to make them engaged and happy to play this game and successful, this is material that can be left on the shelves for non-English speakers. The same with this. Start with very easy sentences. You just show them the word the that they are going to identify every time just by seeing it. And then you are able to do more complex sentences like the ones on the right. I am going to have to say that the only sentences that we had were the red ones that had very complex words and actions. And again, it was a waste of space. The children didn't use it and we were not advancing. So if you plan sentences that they can read independently and then do the actions or understand by themselves, you're going to make them developmentally appropriate and very used. You will see a lot of repetition and a lot of communication. Now, for Montessori classrooms, the movable alphabet is a beautiful material where the child starts to putting words together before reading, right? And in my training, I was told to ask them for the words, and they would come up with the words, and they would not need objects. And that was my aim at the beginning, and we were trying to do that wholeheartedly, but it ended up being ignored again because they didn't have the vocabulary or the inspiration for this work in English. So we would allow it in Spanish, but then realized that they needed a lot of practice and independent work. So we started letting them, like inviting them to use the objects from an activity that is called phonetic object box, which is something that we present to them. And I began to see like an explosion into using the movable alphabet. So as soon as your students have enough vocabulary, try to remove those objects so that they really create their words and their ideas. But if they need help, don't be afraid to help them with anything that they need.
Right, Florencia, and I just want to interject here that one of the themes that keeps coming up when I'm talking with you and with the guys who work with children who are learning English in school is the visual prompt is so important in a way that with a native speaker you just don't see, because the native speaker has this vocabulary in their mind, but that when you have children learning English, you really have to think about the visual or the object to help stimulate them. So anyway, just wanted to mention that.
Yes, Mary-Kay, thank you. Because we want them to write, to create words, to use this material, to start developing the love for expression and the love for reading others, the work of others. And because in Montessori, we are not teaching reading and writing, right? Most of all of us know this, but so we need to keep this in mind. We want to instill in them the passion for this human activity of communication, but we need to help them have the vocabulary and the means to really do this. So we do that. We help them with this objects and any reference that they can see that they need. If you can see the first picture, there are some pictures of objects with their corresponding letter, their sound. And those are beautiful because they have the same cursive font that we use in our classroom in the movable alphabet. And you can see on the second photograph how this little girl is looking for a reference there. We want the children to be independent as much as we can help them be independent. So if they need this as a reference, it is a very important thing for them to use. Back to the classroom, see how on the left there is first the movable alphabet. And do you see this little tray that this girl is trying to place some movable alphabet letters there? Those trays we incorporated because it made it very active for us. In my training, I was reading that we needed to have 3 or 4 movable alphabets. But if you can't because of space or any other reason, these trays that I bought actually in IKEA, they are very long and narrow, are amazing because there is a lot of work with formation of words. The last picture you can see, I don't know if you can if you can appreciate the beautiful poster that I have there, it's from an artist in Canada, in Toronto. I bought it, and it's animals that start with each sound, and the names are written in cursive. And that is also very inspiring for children. You can see this little girl actually created all the names inspired by this print. So again, anything that can inspire children, giving them more vocabulary. And these are the trays that you can see. So instead of having 3 or 4 movable alphabets, we propped it up with those computer stands. So it makes it very accessible for them. And we use those trays, and they take them everywhere, and they are beautiful. So make your classroom, I'm sure you do, rich for lots of activities like this, so that they can create and love writing and reading and forming words. In English, it would be wonderful. So that's what we're trying to do. The first photograph, you will see a little box here. That box has cards, has picture cards of CVC words that the children can use if they need some help or some guidance. And this was not in my training. I don't know if it was in your training, but some people call it the storybook alphabet, some the creative movable alphabet. And I started using it in Toronto, and I really loved it because I can understand that it allows children to create essays and longer sentences, because these are cards now. This is not just the letters. And obviously it's one step towards abstraction. And I love it because you see that blue mat. So they would start writing their essay on their own by themselves. And then I am invited to come and read with them. And it is a beautiful way to separate words and to call into their attention and their awareness things that they know already and that we can correct in the text. And beautiful essays and stories were created. At first, the first time I allowed Spanish, because we wanted them to create a text and an idea. That's what we wanted. But then I realized that with all the preliminary activities that we were doing and all the exposure and the help and all the dynamic work with creation of words, they were doing essays in English. And remember that it's inventive spelling, and it is just beautiful. So you can see here, this little girl is creating something. Some of them are going to be in Spanish because it's the introduction. And this is very easy for us to make modifications and make them aware of things. It's beautiful work. I'm going to share with you that as a coach, I am observing all the classrooms, and I see my students moving up. They are creating amazing essays, and we can really see the difference. It is working really well. So make it very accessible. You can see 2 children. Once they finish their essay and we see it together, we move it a little bit up on the table, and then they write it. And they can do booklets and things like that. Do take the time to sit down with them. This is important because it's not their language. And so it is going to be very clear for them to see where the words end and how to divide that. It's beautiful work. And one of our beloved activities is writing letters and invitations and notes. So do have a lot of that. And meet the child where the child is. So you will see the letters that I receive. Some of them are in Spanish, like this white one that says de Joao para Florencia. But some of them are like beginner's English, of Paola for Ayedo, which is the name of our classroom. But then we have Maya for Florencia, or from Emma to Ayedo. So we see the transition. Do have a lot of communication between classrooms, between teachers. If they write you a letter, of course, I know you do, respond it in English and make this very alive and make it very purposeful. If we are going to be visiting another classroom, they have to write a letter. They invite children writing a letter. I'm sure you do this in your environment. Now, the farm, for many of us, it's a known activity. It's a beloved activity of mine. And it's really to work on the adjective in a very sensorial way. So the first times that I started introducing the farm, it was beautiful, but then it very quickly moved to using it in Spanish. And I thought, that's the way it is. There's no way I can ask the children to create sentences like the brown cow or the horse. Those words were very difficult for them, and they were not doing the work. So that's when I started thinking, what if I have a little box that is there with the objects, and we learn those objects, we sensorially and games and in many ways learn the names of the animals in the farm, and maybe they can use them in English. The beauty of using the adjective work in English is that, as we know, the adjective goes before the noun. So the act of cutting, there's a strip of paper. Sorry if everybody knows this. I'm just trying to explain for everybody. There is a strip of paper where we write, for example, the brown cow. We write the cow, and then we write brown after that, and we read it and we say, does it make sense? Does it sound good? The cow brown? No, it doesn't. So we cut the strip of paper to make it possible for the children to put brown before the noun. This magic of the adjective in English was lost when they were using it in Spanish. So it is important that we help the children use this beautiful material, and we help them. So this is what I created, the preliminary presentation. This one was first to make them aware of the beginning sound. So you can see farmer, dog. We created this activity. They would practice many times, and they started learning the vocabulary. It was enrichment of vocabulary. And when the children knew this, they went to take out the farm, and they were successful using it in English. So this was a beautiful way for us to help them make this work available. Another example, you can see this little girl. This is for compound words. So on the right, you see the cards that we have in our training. We have these cards, we print them out, we cut them in half, and they put them together and create the compound words. Again, material that was on my shelf, and they were not successful doing it by themselves. They were successful if I was sitting down with them. So I created this box that you see here with objects, and we introduced the compound words first orally, and then with this preliminary presentation, and then created the labels for the child to match. And that allowed them to very successfully move to the Montessori materials that we have on the right. And so many classrooms do rotation of materials. We really need to do this in a classroom that is teaching English, because we need to give them more vocabulary. So the farm becomes a hibernation cave like this one. This is a cave that we created, and this is hibernation, or a like an ocean habitat. Do create different activities for adjective work depending on the seasons is wonderful. So you can see this preliminary presentation where they are learning the new vocabulary. And then I do create written labels for them that they start reading. So you can see that this is the hibernation with on the next step where they have the cards, and it says, for example, the brown deer and the little figures to symbolize them. And the next part of the work is when they start writing the sentences. I didn't see them writing their own sentences the first years that I was doing this work. until I understood they need vocabulary, they need preliminary activities. Another example, this is in June. This is sea animals. In the middle, very short written labels, and at the end, very long sentences. Long sentences. But look at the work that they're doing. We are providing those sentences before they were not available. They are supposed to be created by the children. That was not happening at all. So we have these long sentences first, and they can symbolize which one is the action, which one is the adjective, the article, and then they can cut these sentences apart in little pieces. And the children, you see the last photograph, they are creating their own order and sentence. Too bad you cannot see the pictures, but the little girl has like this beautiful face of, I can't believe we created this very long sentence by ourselves. So again, we are making these materials developmentally appropriate for them to use. Another area is math. Because the children need to identify the numbers in English and to count in sequence. So this is important for us as English as a new language for them. We need for them to recognize numbers randomly, and they are not in their vocabulary. They don't hear them. They don't see them on the streets. So we need to make some adaptations. Teens and tens are very difficult for most children. So we need to think of activities for them to really learn them and recognize them. And I'm going to share two things that I had in my classroom, which is the number line and the calendar, to see if you like these ideas. The teens are very tricky. They were tricky for children in Canada, and they were tricky for children in the United States as well. So imagine for children counting in Spanish and never listening to the sequence of the teens. So besides doing them orally, we do some adaptations. And for example, this work, for the people that don't know, is creating the teen numbers with cards and with beads. And for this little girl, it is very challenging to learn all of them and to recognize them. So we observed and we realized that she needed only to have the first 5 numbers presented to her. And so that is the adaptation that we are doing. And she is now writing them and practicing. You can see on the next slide. And now she's successful recognizing the numbers. It's been a great adaptation for many children. The tens are also difficult for them to count in by tens and continue counting up to 100 and so on. So we do a lot of games like make 45 or bring me 91 with the little beads. So do observe and think of activities that they can do to really practice these numbers and these names and be successful counting in English and recognizing in English the numbers. And this is a beautiful activity that we do in our classroom, which is putting 2 children together to work. When they are learning English, everybody has a different level, different skills. But if they are together and with different peers all the time, they help each other. So you first present the math activity to one child. You make sure that they understand, you see them repeat, and then you invite them to work with a peer. And the results have been amazing for us. Math is very active in our classroom. So they help each other with number recognition, the oral counting, and the sequence. The vocabulary also is repeated all the time. So these children can do 4 + 5 = 9, because that is the way we state the operations, right? The math operations. And this has been very successful. So helping each other really increases their success. They are speaking in English and they are advancing really, really noticeably. different activities pairing together. As you can see, it's different combinations of children. It's been beautiful work. The first years, I saw very little math work that was advanced happening, and lots of problems asking them to do it in English. But if they help each other, it's been a big difference for us. Look at that. They do the dot game, which is an addition of many numbers, and they do them together, and then they check the results. It's been beautiful. And then the addition together. They help each other, and it's been beautiful. Skip counting, especially. They really do help each other. They don't have the same skills. It's been beautiful. And two things that I incorporated. I saw a number line in one video, and I put it up. And it was really beautiful reference for the children who were learning, because and I decided to do it in the math area, and it ended abruptly at 200. And that was to express to children that numbers could go on forever, but just to show them the sequence, and especially after 100 and after the tens, it made a big difference in our classroom. It's not up anymore, but I saw a difference, and many children were probably asking sometimes, what comes after 50? What comes after 51? And I would say, go see on the line. And they would see, and then eventually they were able to do this by themselves. This is very important for them to do skip counting of the chains. And then the calendar is probably more for the elementary, but sensorially, we can use this kind of calendar, and that is great practice for them to count in sequence, and then to calculate how many days. It was beautiful. How many days for my birthday? How many sleeps for my birthday? 5 more sleeps, and it's a Tuesday, and it's a Wednesday, and it's cold, and it's sunny, and tomorrow, yesterday, the days of the week, the months, and the holidays. It was a very sensorial way for them to understand time, whoever was ready, but especially to practice numbers. And another one is the linear calendar. I don't know if you see on the window next to the bells, there's this strip. I found it a year ago. Somebody offered it for free. I just printed it out and thought, I don't know what I'm going to do with this. So this is right next to the calendar, and it's beautiful because it is for the current year, and it has the number of like January 4th, and they would have to write underneath 4, and so that was a linear way for them to see. It was beautiful for us to practice numbers this way. Organic and dynamic. And the last thing I want to share with you is that reading in a Montessori classroom is very, very rich with labels, and creating labels and labels of the environment and books that we create, and all that is beautiful. But we also need to help them progress in a very specific way. When I was teaching in Toronto, I was introduced to the Bob books. The Bob books are the ones that you see this little character that is like a round face. And not everybody loves them, but I saw them in action, and I realized that for our children, it was a good way for them to be introduced more challenging words in a very progressive way. And I was able to see how they were progressing. If they had some difficulties, which words I could be playing or working with them or presenting as materials. So do plan this very carefully so that you can help them. And the children that had done that for the last 4 years, when they come to the to the lower elementary, they were reading way better than the children that were not reading Bob books. So it's an idea that I'm sharing with you. And do keep a log of the reading. This is a very messy page. I'm so sorry, but this is showing me which book they're reading. So I created this reading log system where I keep track of what they do. It's the name of the child and the date that I am reading. Each of these different colors show a different day, the title of the book, and the special notes, for example, which words they are not recognizing, if they are confusing the B and the D. Do have this so that you can really help your children right away, help advance and solve problems. It has been a beautiful incorporation into our program. And this is the last idea that I would like to share with you. For our children, chapter book reading is really tricky. So we found, so if you find chapter books that they can really understand, do incorporate this every day. So in my classroom, we would do it at the end of the day when they were getting ready to go home. I would read this book, this collection, and it was very easy for them to see. As you can see, it's Mr. and Mrs. Watson, who have a pig called Mercy. And it's very fun for them, and they are getting used to listening to a lot of vocabulary. This is a very good practice for us. And I'm ending this presentation with a quote. We want our children in the children's houses to create from their heart, to really feel the inspiration to write, to read. And we need to help them to do that in a different language. So do try to see what you need to do to make your children successful and use the new language, but especially to use language as a creative human expression, like Maria Montessori told us to do. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Florencia. That was quite remarkable. I know that before we move to questions, we're going to do our second Menti and ask the people in the audience what their aha moment was listening to Florencia. She covered many different topics, many different aspects of the needs of children who are learning English in school, and really that their time in school is the only time they're getting that input of vocabulary and sounds, etc. So it's incredibly important, is like she's saying, to just be looking for all different kinds of ways to stimulate that language development for them. So anyway, but I want to just put it to all of you. We're going to do another Menti and ask you for your aha moment from today's talk. And then we'll move to your questions. The variations on the far. How to work with emergent readers. The use of a monthly calendar to practice numbers and counting. Talk about the seasons, holidays, preliminary activities. The need for scaffolding with the peer learning, which I think is beautiful, like Florencia pointed out. You could really take advantage of the children having their different strengths, and they can help each other. Yeah, a lot of preliminary activities. And that's so crucial. Like Florencia said, the children can't independently use the farm if they don't know the names of the animals in English. If not, they're going to use it in Spanish, which is fine too, but it's not going to help them build their knowledge of prepositions in English, which is one of the things, and adjectives, which is what we hope to see them doing. And the singing of the books, I also thought that was a beautiful comment. In elementary, they talk more about chanting and using chants, but singing books for 3 to 6, that's really brilliant, really nice. So I think that Florencia has shared how we can definitely stay true to our Montessori principles and adapt to the needs of our children. So I think now I'll shift to some of the questions that people have put in the chat. The first question is very specific, Florencia. It's, when introducing sandpaper letters to 3 to 6-year-old children, which sounds are best to present, L1 or L2? If the language sounds similar, like Spanish, English, would you present L2 sounds, even if the child does not have a lot of L2 vocabulary yet?
We have done different things, and we have noticed that because we first wanted to respect and work on the language that they already had.
Mm-hmm.
And so we started introducing sounds in Spanish and then kind of moving into English, but it actually didn't work very well.
Mm-hmm.
So we just decided to present in English, the sounds in English. The children are organically using the sounds in Spanish because at home they are read to, and and parents do show them some sounds and some letters. So eventually they start using the sounds in Spanish when they come to school. And that's when we, for example, say, today we were reading rough and muff, have fun. And so the student said, roof and move, have fun, because in Spanish, that's how you would read it. So it's a wonderful way for us to say, but remember, it's like umbrella. Remember,
Mm-hmm.
in Spanish, it is u,
Mm-hmm.
but in English, it is a.
Mm-hmm.
So we do only English. And when the situations come up with the language that is learned at home, then we make some explanations and we go back to English. The Spanish is a phonetic language, so it's very easy to very quickly adapt.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what happens with other languages, and that's a very good question.
Mm-hmm.
But no, only in English.
This person is thinking about Spanish, English. And I think you answered the last part of her question, which is, should we follow the natural language acquisition of each language depending on the child's level? And I think the example you just gave from today is a sign of that you're doing both at the same time. So another question, how to introduce phonetics in English and Spanish? This classroom has an English guide and a Spanish speaking guide, and we found it really confusing. The children mostly come from Spain. So I guess what the person is saying is that they were introducing both simultaneously and the children found it confusing. Do you have any reflections on that, Florencia?
Yes, we did have that situation again when we were learning and we didn't know. Well, we not that we didn't know, but we wanted to really work on the language that they had before.
Mm-hmm.
But then the results were delays that were unnecessary. No, we just stick to presenting phonograms in English. I don't think that in Spanish we have so few and very quickly for them to pick up, because they are in their communication all the time. They hear it on TV with the parents in conversations. So only English phonograms, and we only work with English, and it's worked really well. When they start lower elementary, the Spanish teacher comes in and works with them. It's actually 1 hour a day. And I don't think if it's a day, it's even 1 hour weekly. And they very quickly learn the Spanish phonograms. So do concentrate on the English ones that are way more tricky than the Spanish ones. And it's 16. You don't introduce all of them. Muriel Dreyer says 16. This is a system that we also use, and we just introduced those 16 that are on your sandpaper letter, green letters. Those phonograms are the ones that we introduce.
So this is another question, which I don't know if you'll be able to answer, but to what extent can these activities be used for other languages?
Oh, what a good question. I don't have experience with that.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, English is a very different language from Spanish, in that Spanish is completely phonetic and English has so many ways of writing and sounding and sounds. But I think that the principle is the same. I think that you need to observe your students, and depending on the language, see what their needs are and adapt to those needs. These are adaptations that are just ideas of things that I discovered little by little and tried. I think that just observing and trying to really help them to make these materials developmentally appropriate for them is the answer. So hopefully this would be something that could be useful in a different combination of languages.
Yeah, and I would say that if someone, the person who asked this, what I would say is just follow Florencia's example and be very thoughtful and careful with each step, and then step back and observe what the result is. And the children will tell you if it was appropriate or not. And if, like she said, with some of her adaptations that she tried, and then she was suddenly seeing all of this spontaneous work happening in the environment with materials that hadn't been touched before. So that kind of tells you, okay, I've hit on something that works here. So it really is a question of thoughtfully taking steps and then observing.
If I may say something, Mary Kay, thank you for reminding us of that. Those steps are very important because we want to stay true to Montessori, and we do have amazing materials. We might not need more materials, but we might need some adaptations, right? So do be very careful and really plan your little adaptations or little preliminary activities very carefully, and very quickly remove them from the environment when they are not needed, so that you go back to the materials, but do observe your children.
So there's some comments thanking you, of course.
Thank you.
And someone comments on the scaffolding and the non-competitive aspect of Montessori environments is very refreshing. And I think that that there's so few questions obviously tells you, Florencia, that you did a very good job. You were very clear in your explanation. So thank you for that. Thank you for everything. And as with all of our talks, this will get processed and will be posted on our website and our YouTube channel, so that if you have colleagues who you think, oh, they would love this, they need to hear this, they can hear it later. You can share it with them. I think for now we'll move, I'll just remind everyone, as I mentioned before, we did a series of talks from elementary guides, then we had one school leader, and this was now the first of what's going to be 3 talks from Children's House guides. So just have a quick look at the upcoming schedule. And now we're going to get back into a more frequent cadence. In 2 weeks, we're going to have Danielle Deslauriers, who is a 3 to 6 guide also in Spain. And she actually is, when she did her training, she was able to also do a master's degree because she did it at a university in Spain where that is an option. And so she has done some research. And so she's also going to be sharing from her research. And then we have Romali Rosales, who is going to share her experience of setting up first when she was in Mexico. She set up an English corner in a children's house, and then she moved to the UK and she set up a Spanish corner in an English children's house. So she wants to share her experiences of what that can look like and what she learned. And last, but certainly not least, we have a language specialist, Lucy Urbanachkova, which I'll practice later. Sorry, Lucy. She will be sharing with us her reflections on steps to go through when you have the need to create new materials. She works with mostly elementary children and adolescents in the school where she is in Prague, but she's reflected a lot about how to, when you see a need for a material or an exercise or practice with something that you don't have. So she's going to share that with us, and that will be our last talk before the summer. So hopefully you all can join us in the future and let your friends and colleagues know. And yeah, I mean, as always, I'll be sending out a newsletter soon with this. And yeah, we look forward to any comments that you want to write back and share with us. Also your own experiences, because we know part of the work of our project is that we know there are lots of people doing this work and we haven't had many opportunities to hear from each other. So I'm always happy to hear from people who share their experiences of what they've learned in their environments. And so, yeah, I invite you, there's always an open invitation to write and share experiences. And if we can even organize, you can present in a community conversation or write something for our website. So we're always very happy to hear from you.